Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for everybody being here and being part of this august group. Um, when you look back over the last 20 years, we've done a lot. This program has done a bunch. And when you look at compared to what CDOT is putting out statewide and what we're doing in this program in 2C for our region and the city, is pretty damn amazing. And so I just appreciate all of you taking an interest in all of that positive um, construction and maintenance and things that we're doing. And thanks everybody for being part of this group. So, okay, so voting members, Rick.
Mr. Chair, all alternates can vote right now, pending whether or not Steve Murray joins or Cindy from Raymond and Bruce from Callahan. But right now, all alternates can vote. The only alternate who's on the bubble is a new CAC member, Jeff Snelling, in the corner. And I think Jim will introduce the new CAC members here shortly.
Okay. So I would like to opportunity to introduce our new CAC members, Jamie Lee Smith and Jeff Snelling. And if you guys want to take just a second to introduce yourselves. Jeff, you go. All right, whatever. Jamie.
Hi, like he said, my name's Jamie Smith. I've been living in Colorado Springs for the last 5 years, and I'm in the consulting industry for roadway engineering. And we're just looking for ways to just become more involved in the community. So excited to be here. So nice to meet all of you.
Jamie's got some experience in this kind of environment in his previous work experience. And so hopefully he'll be able to contribute very well. So, okay, Jeff.
Nice to meet all of you. I'm Jeff Snelling. I grew up and was raised here. Moved away for about 30 something years, found my way back home. So happy to be here. Currently, I'm a project manager or a transportation consultant, but different hats I've worn over the years. Was city engineer for Salt Lake City, utilities manager in Salt Lake, working for different consulting firms, private development and transportation and utilities. So anyway, happy to be here and nice to meet all of you.
Great. Awesome. Welcome. Okay. Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Sorry. Thank you, Ed. Barb, thank you. Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not seeing any online. The agenda is approved. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In keeping with past practice, I am handling the nomination process for the chair since you have the three officers. So you need to do the chair first, and then whoever you select as chair can handle the nomination and voting process on the first vice chair and second vice chair. So I will open the floor to nominations for the CAC chair for calendar 2025. Yes, ma'am.
You may.
Okay, is there a second? Okay. That was okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay, without there being any other nominations, all in favor of Jim Godfrey being your chair for calendar 25, say aye. Aye. Unanimous. Oh, any opposed? I didn't hear any, so it's unanimous. So I'll turn the chairmanship that I had temporarily for 30 seconds back over to Jim.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be be part of this group, and I'm honored that you have confidence in me to help us move forward through 2025. So thank you for your confidence. You didn't hear any nays? Oh, yeah. Well, thank you all very much. I'm honored. Okay, so we need to elect first vice chair. So Ed.
Yes, I spoke with Larry Tobias before I got here, and as you know, he's in the hospital. He did ask that I put his name in nomination. I think you're all familiar with him, so I won't go into details, but he will get out of the hospital tomorrow and he sends his regards for not being here. But I nominate Larry Tobias. Double nomination, Jim.
Anybody second, Larry's,
I'll second that, Tony.
okay, thank you, Tony. Thanks. Thank you. Any other nominations for first vice chair? Okay, not hearing any or seeing any hands raised. We can take a vote on voting for Larry Tobias as the first vice chair. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right, Larry, choo choo. Here's the railroad. You're here. All right, second vice chair. Any nominations? I'll nominate Ed Dills. Kathy, seconds. Any other nominations for second vice chair? Okay, all those in favor for Ed as second vice chair, say aye. Any opposed? Not seeing or hearing any? Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Larry, for contributing. Appreciate it. All right. Public comment for items not on the agenda. Anybody have anything they want to bring up or discuss, or anybody in the audience? Nothing? You don't want to throw any wrenches in the system or anything? This is January. I mean, nothing? Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Always been on the wall and I've just never noticed them.
No, they're relatively new. Yeah, it is. And they're for sale, right? And there's a basket of other prints back there, I think so. So, yeah, no, they've started doing this in the last 6 months or 8 months or so. Yeah, so, yeah, it's a nice addition. I think it's pretty. All right. No public comments. Item number 5, approval of the minutes of the December 4th meeting. Anybody have any corrections, additions, or concerns? Not seeing any online. I have a motion to approve the minutes as approved. Barb? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, it's going good. All right, financial reports. Lisa.
All right, Lisa Corey, I'm the finance manager for the PPRTA.
Hey, Lisa, first,
Yep.
how you doing?
I'm okay. I should be cleared to drive within a week or two.
Awesome. That's good
It's been a
news.
long journey.
Yes, it has.
So the sales and use tax I'm reporting is for the month of October. We received $13,437,532. And that put us above our October budget by $650,615 or 5.1%. Our October 24 revenues were above October 23 by $284,948 or 2.2%. Any questions?
That's an interesting tax curve when you look at this year. But I'm glad to see that October back up, and Gus, listening to the news, November and December, November may be a little low, but it looks like December was fairly good.
Yeah, it was a little different this year with October because we usually see a little bit of a downturn in October, and we actually received more in October than September. So that's why that above budget difference is quite a bit higher this month.
Yeah, well, good news.
Yeah.
And so I just need, and Gail, maybe you might want to chime in, but as we looking at financials, and we'll come across this later on the annual letter to the board, but after 20 years, we're about ready to close out RTA 1. Is that a fair statement, Gail?
It will at least have a zero balance for a period of time.
And the difference would be contractor inputs or refunds or something?
Right, it's developer and any kind of contributions back to the project. So we were at zero or relatively close to zero. And then the county received $127,000 back in utility rebates or refunds from that project. So that's one reason why we may want to keep that project around, even if it sits at zero for some time, because as I was talking with Brandy too, there's a way that was set up. There's a chance we could get future developer contributions back to the project. And then when that happens, then we'll incorporate it into the Mark Shuffle project as a whole.
But for all intensive purposes, RTA one projects are completed.
Yes.
Completely completed, funded, not completed work. Maybe that's a better.
Well, maybe.
Now, how about all PPRTA one funds have been spent?
That's
Yes.
that's a better statement. Yeah, that's a good.
On PPRTA one activities.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
Yeah, Carlos Perez, College from CSTAB. Yeah, no, I had been looking at these numbers here. It did look like, yeah, we had a little bit of uptick for October, but I did compare this. I wasn't going to say anything, but I did want to go back and look at the rate of inflation or the CPI-U, which is the Consumer Price Index for urban areas. Also population increase. And if you look at the chart, it's the one with the graph on it. We're looking at about currently collections from last year, about 1.3%. Inflation's running about 2% in Colorado right now, so we're behind inflation at this point. I would expect our tax revenues to at least keep up with inflation, also with population increases, which is about 2% here in Colorado Springs. So it, by the way, it is what it is, but I'm going to have to say, with all due respect, I kind of consider it's kind of weak. I was at least expecting our revenue, or at least what we're collecting, to at least keep up with inflation, and that's not the case. And I think with, high interest rates, people are not buying vehicles or cars. Maybe housing is affected by that. And also, just in general, people might be slowing down on spending. So it'll be interesting to see what the next 2 months are, for 2024. But I just didn't have the same read that you had as far as being more bullish. I'm probably more bearish on the numbers here at this point, based on what I've seen with other numbers like CPI.
Yeah, building permits were down in October, September and October, in terms of, and we recognize that's where a lot of that revenue comes from, on people building houses and then filling them and furnishing them and all that other kind of stuff. There's an awful lot of cars riding around with temporary tags, and a lot of them expired. But there are an awful lot of cars riding around with temporary tags, so people are buying vehicles. So we'll see, but yeah, we'll to be determined for next year for sure. We'll see what the last 2 months go. All right, very good. Thank you, Carlos. Any other questions for Lisa? Great job, Lisa. Thank you. Get better.
Thank you.
All right, number 7, capital and maintenance and public transportation contract, City Colorado Springs.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Gail Sturman with the City of Colorado Springs. Today, the city has 6 contracts for the CAS consideration and recommendation to the board. The first one is for Academy Boulevard reconstruction. This is specifically focused on the segment between Bijou Street and Airport Street, or the north segment as we've described it in the past. There is a map. Actually, there's not a map. I meant to include a map, including a project, but this runs from Bijou to Airport, as I mentioned. This is a closeout change order and closes out the claim that I mentioned last month that we had with the contractor. So this is going to be, it's intended to be the absolute last thing from a construction contractor's perspective on both the north and south segment related to this. So if you got any questions to that, this is actually a good result for us. Yes, Rich.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, claims get settled. Claims get resolved in, various different ways, merit-based versus admin-based. So I've just questioned, it's got a general statement that this closes out for past work. And then also settles the claim. So I'm just wondering if you got a breakout of merit versus admin.
So it is, I would say, a majority administrative. I think the big difference in between the numbers between us was that what Ames claimed was the financial difference for the time, the additional time to complete that north segment. And that's where we really came more to a resolution, and the rest was administrative based on the documentation they provided.
Okay.
And we'll see a new contract come forward soon?
Yes, we plan on doing an RFP to get a new construction contractor this quarter. And then you'll see that construction contract come in place. And you'll also see us bring a line item transfer to clean up the finances between these 2 segments, and then also putting more funding into the south segment for construction.
So anticipating comments from the board we're going to wrap up work and open traffic up and all that stuff back on that segment. I haven't
It,
been.
it already has done. It's
Okay,
been
I haven't
open for a
down there
while.
Okay,
Mhm.
I had been down.
Yeah, and we actually, as part of this, we had been holding up and issuing the substantial completion certificate and some other things because basically it was more time. There was other administrative stuff, as I mentioned, but there was some time discrepancies that we were working through with them. But substantial completion's been issued,
Okay.
traffic's back open for traffic. This is where we've resolved for the closeout change order.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on, give me a moment here just to find the mute button. All right. I'm going to move on to the city's second contract. This is for the Mark Shuffle Road improvements. But this is associated with three property acquisitions that need to take place as part of this that are over $100,000 apiece. And there is a map showing the three parcels. And on these parcels, we have one that's a full parcel taken, the others that have temporary, permanent easements right away and Colorado Springs utilities easements. Those of you who are familiar with the Sylvan Delivery System corridor, there is a planned freshwater pipeline that continues from Constitution North on the east side of Mark Shuffle. And so we've been working so we're not having to go take multiple bites at the apple with these property owners. We've been working with Colorado Springs Utilities to get their easements while we come and get the property necessary for Mark Shuffle Road. So you'll see that under these three, for these three total acquisitions, the cost is $985,570 and $259,946.25. It'll be funds that are anticipated to come from Colorado Springs Utilities. I will let you know that we're asking for PPRTA, your recommendation, and then the PPRTA board approval next week. A couple of things happen with this simultaneously. We also are going to city council this month, and we're also going to be going to the utilities board to get their approval. So this requires three different sets of approvals, but we're asking for PPRTA, since you're the fiduciary responsibility for a large portion of it, to approve this acquisition. All right, moving on to number 3. The city has a project and construction management software that we use to help delivery with the PPRTA projects, along with other capital projects from the city. A few years ago, we went through an RFP process and we selected the product by Arrigo Software Technologies, Masterworks. And then it was a 5-year contract. This is for our 2025 fees. The total amount is $110,000, and of that, $73,125 is attributed towards PPRTA. I'm going to talk about contracts 4, 5, and 6 together. These are all three are task orders underneath our concrete on-call contracts that we put in place, and you guys have been involved in the renewals recently. This is going to be adding a $1,299,812 to Eagle View Concrete for the areas identified in the memo. We'll be adding another $1,167,549 to HCD Inc. for the segments identified in that memo. And the last one will be for Concrete Experts in the amount of $851,141. And again, the work areas they've been identified are included in your memo. So those are the city's 6 contracts for your consideration. I'm happy to answer questions and appreciate your recommendation to the board.
Any questions for Gail? Not seeing any online. All those in favor say aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Motion to approve to take to the board. Thank you. Thanks, Brandy. Second? Carlos, thank you. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Gail. All right, Josh, anybody from the county? Any questions on any of the county stuff? Anybody online for the county? Don't see anybody. In looking over the contracts, I didn't see anything. Most of it was kind of like purchase materials and ongoing annual contracts for the different products. Anybody have any?
I just have one.
Rick?
It was kind of confusing on this, on the one for Mesa Ridge Parkview project. They have three up, contract amendments. They started out at 789,000 for a final. And then they have two upgrades for 890,000 and 947,000, or excuse me, those are the two cumulative, 91,000 and 57,000. I was just wondering why we have this size of updates after the final. They'd be on page 91, 61,
61.
61.
Rick, do you have any insight?
Sorry, I don't.
Okay. Anybody else comment on what Rick was talking about? This was on the Mesa Ridge.
Yeah, and the first one, it's almost 800,000 was supposedly the final. But then we come back with another 91,002 and 57,002 after the final. And that seems like an awful lot after finals.
Yeah, see what you're saying. So what do we do? Do we pull this out and ask Josh for a question for clarity before the board meeting? Or do we make a part of our motion to tentative approval or tentative with additional questions or whatever? So you want to pull this one out of the counties and talk about it individually? Ed?
I think we should pull it out because I hate to recommend something out of ignorance.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Doesn't do much for our credibility.
What is the rest of the group? Pull it out. Okay. Any other questions on any of the other projects the county's presented? Carlos?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I guess this was more of a comment here. It looked like I did look up, there are going to be projects that had not seen before because they're on PPRTA 3, but the Baptist Hodgin Roller Coaster Road intersection project, that's a PPRTA 3 project. It's quite interesting that now there's this cutover from PPRTA 2, and then but we're not going to be, just to make clear, we're not going to be able to get the money for this until we receive the check from the state in about 2.5 months, right? So based on, and it looks like a cash flow question here. They're going to do the work, we approve it. This has already been budgeted, by the way.
Right.
But basically on how fast they actually do these design services, we're going to, get the revenue. And I guess it was just more of well, I wouldn't get to call it a concern, but just to understand the sequencing of how cash comes into our PPRTA 3 budget. And then we can pay these projects that are now PPRTA 3 because we don't have the money technically unless we advance it from one of our PPRTA 2.
So Rick, correct me, but we can technically incur expenses now. Is that correct? Then we just pay them when we have the money or not?
That would be my opinion, but Lisa, are you on? And would you,
Yeah, I agree.
And my recollection is these were like, and Lisa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, these are like net 60 invoices anyways. So, again, we collect the money, we get the invoices, we can hold off on whatever the net agreement is. I don't know if it's 60 or 90. Lisa, do you remember what our, this is, I'm just trying to remember what Bev had said. She had told me one time, I'm just drawing a blank right now here in front of the crowd, but I believe it was like 60 days.
It's probably at least 60 days because these go through to each member government for whatever their duration of time is before we even see them.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, when I've looked at how much money we're collecting, when you see it kind of not as robust as I had hoped, for collections, you get I don't know, you just want to watch these things. And so no concerns about this. We have budgeted. We know the money is coming in. We just want to make sure that the sequencing here for the PPRTA 3 just rolls over. And it doesn't say this on the memo that this is a PPRTA 3 because I didn't recognize it, but it is new and we want to get working on it. So right. I support it and let's get it done. I just want to make sure we're hitting the ground running, like we say in our report to the citizens. So thank you.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
Josh Palmer has joined us virtually.
Oh, okay. Josh, you there, buddy?
Yeah, Jim, I'm here. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Rick Hoover had a question on one of your projects. And Rick, would you mind restating your question?
Yeah, on your, on page 61, you were talking about the Mesa Ridge project, and you had, for Wilson and Company, you had a final at 799,000, but then you have two updates, amendments for another 150,000. I was just trying to figure out why, if you already have a final, why it's costing us 150,000 more to do extra work.
Because we've added some additional scope to their work. So as this project has progressed, there was a need to account for some additional impacts from, well, impacted by additional development, but change in our design requirements because of that.
Is any of that utilities?
No, I don't believe it's utilities.
Okay, well, thank you. That's just a lot of money for after final, I think. Thank you.
And all those scope increases were approved by county. I mean, you guys are okay with all that, obviously?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's typical. We'll review requests from the contractors or our vendors to for any increases in design or construction support. So we review all those costs, and we often will negotiate based on what they request versus what is actually needed. So yeah, we review that. Our design team reviews it. Project management reviews it. Oftentimes, if there's significant items, myself or the deputy county engineer will review and approve as well.
Okay. That answer anybody else's concerns?
Jim, can I chime in?
Go ahead, Brandy.
And I'm going to put Rich on the spot because I'm sure he's done this before, but anytime you're in a construction project, you find things that you add in as you kind of unveil and bring the project to fruition, saying it's going to be cheaper now. We already have everything torn apart. We want to add this piece. So generally when it gets to this point, it's something that the county or the city is adding in, and then they negotiate the price. So I've done it on more than one project, and I'm sure you have as well, Rich and Gail, just to get it to this point. So 57,000 on $800,000 probably seems pretty big, but at the end of the day, I think it checks a box that the county was looking for to get done while they had the project in process.
Yep.
And then Josh, I don't want to put you on the spot, and I'll go back to Rick just in case, but do you mind running through your quick list for everybody, just so we've got you and be on record?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense, Rick?
Are you speaking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, part of my, when I was looking at it, the time span wasn't all that long. It's 21 to 24. And so the time span isn't all that long. So I was just a little concerned about if it had been back 5 years ago, then that would have been one thing about the increase in the inflation, et cetera. But the time span is only 3 years.
When I was down at Fountain, we had the cost go up 20% in 1 year. So that was a rough time.
So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
thanks
we've
for the
seen,
answer.
some of this had to do with lighting. So there have been some pretty significant costs, materials costs in the last couple of years. Like Brandy said, we're seeing 15, 20, sometimes 30% increases, especially things that are directly related to steel production and shipping. And like Brandy also mentioned, sometimes we especially projects that run multiple years, what we expected as far as design components change over the course of a couple years, as do citizens' expectations. Some of this was for lighting, so what our citizens expect 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago will change, and we try to be nimble and flexible in what we are providing our citizens, and that's often reflected in design changes.
All right, Josh, would you mind just kind of stepping through your cover memo and the projects?
Absolutely.
Please?
Yep. So the first one is $500,000. So to Schmidt Construction. So most of these here are for our annual maintenance work, whether it's for internal materials that we do in-house or contracts for our vendors and contractors to supply those services for us. So the first one is $500,000 to Schmidt. So these are the chips. So this is for our chip seal program. Next one is $80,000 again to Schmidt for aggregate. So this is to provide materials to our highway division to perform our graveling and our street maintenance work. The third one is $60,000 to Maxwell crack seal material. Again, this is materials for our highway division to perform our in-house crack seal work. So we contract out a good portion, but we also have a crack seal group within our highway division that does a lot of our work for us ourselves. We found historically that we are much more efficient if we're able to do this work in-house, but we often don't have the labor resources to do it all. So we'll contract out a good portion, but this $60,000 is for the in-house crack seal materials for our crack seal group. The fourth one is a not to exceed amount of $1 million for chip seal oil. Again, this goes towards our in-house chip seal program. So that's the fifth one, $200,000 again to Schmidt, asphalt paving materials. So this is asphalt. This is mixed asphalt itself. So we've recently started doing more paving work, small paving work in-house, as opposed to trying to contract out. You know, if we need to go out and repave 200 feet of road, it's cheaper if we are able to do it ourselves. So securing mixed asphalt helps us complete that work in-house. The next one is $5 million to A1 Chip Seal. So this is a part of our multi-year contract with A1 Chip Seal to do our external chip seal efforts. The next one is $4,500,000. So this will be, we have a list of approved vendors, and you can see there in the packet, I believe there's 4 or 5, AAA, Full Tilt, LSM, Lucky Dog, Alinic, HCD, and Concrete Experts, I believe. So that's 6. We have a pre-approved list of vendors that we started doing this. Yes, last year was the first year that we have the opportunity to issue task orders to a single or multiple possible vendors. We found that we were able to get better pricing, better scheduling, and also provide opportunities for some of the smaller local contractors to be able to participate in our concrete paving program. So that this contract is a not to exceed amount of $4,500,000 that will be assigned on a task basis to one or multiple of these approved vendors. The next one is a design contract to AECOM for the Baptist Hodgin roller coaster intersection. And as you may recall, we received approval from the board to self-fund the design of the Baptist Hodgin roller coaster intersection starting last year. This was to expedite the design so we can get to construction first thing in 2025, or as first thing as possible, hopefully in the first or second quarter of 2025. So this is a contract, a design contract to AECOM to perform the design efforts for the improvements of this intersection. And that amount is $815,612. And the final contract or contract amendment, as we discussed, first thing is $57,292 to Wilson. So this is for the Mesa Ridge project, like we talked about, to add some additional and revised design considerations from the county that we asked Wilson and Company to perform to complete the design for the Mesa Ridge Parkway project. And this is a PPRTA 2 project. So again, apologize for being late. For whatever reason, I didn't have this on my schedule, so I appreciate Gail giving me a heads up. So I'm willing to answer any questions that you may have about our contracts.
What, does that mean that you were available yesterday when we weren't?
I was available yesterday, yeah.
All right.
In my head, I knew that we weren't doing it yesterday and we were doing it today, but if it's not on my calendar, I often forget that I'm doing something and it just wasn't on my calendar. So
I think we've all been there.
yeah.
Any other questions for Josh? Rick, you got your stuff answered? Yeah. Okay. Do I have a recommendation to approve the county's request for projects as presented? Barb, second. Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Not seeing any. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Member government, City of Colorado Springs Transit Service monthly update.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Teagarden, Senior Transit Planner with Mountain Metro Transit. We report the monthly transit update. So we'll go ahead and take a look here. For our city bus service for fixed route ridership, in November, we did lose some ridership in November compared to last year. There's a couple of severe weather days that affected that, so we'd expect the ridership to decrease. We also had one less weekday as well, which brings the ridership down. Good news is, cumulatively through November this year, our ridership was still 0.5% higher than last year. So even with the extra weather days, we're still trending in the right direction there. We also saw a very similar pattern with our ADA paratransit service. So we had the reduced ridership because of those weather days. And that one is actually cumulatively through November, 4% higher than the previous year. So both are trending in the right direction. Next, we do have some in-depth information in our transit highlights section. So that's where I want to point your attention to here. I believe it'll be on page 68 of the packet. Screen there. Okay, excellent. Yep. Okay. So first we have we had our downtown terminal decoration and customer appreciation event. MMT staff decorated the downtown terminal, interacted with the public, ended up giving out about 7 gallons of hot cocoa, I think nearly 500 candy canes, provided some transit information, and had good conversations with the public. So it was a very positive event all around. So everyone seemed to enjoy that. Next, we also wanted to recognize we had Driver of the Year recognition. MMT congratulates the 2 drivers of the year that were selected by TransDev for our fixed route and our paratransit. We had Ruben Valdez and Sandria Stacks, and they were selected due to their excellent service that they provide to the public. And we congratulate them for that award. Next, we do have our 2050 plans, which are in progress right now. We have the regional transit plan and a specialized transportation plan. In coordination with PPACG, MMT has these 2050 plans in progress. They are nearing completion. And these are being circulated through the boards and committees. And then once they're approved, they'll also be released for a 30-day public comment window. So that's coming up soon. And then we're looking forward to completion of those plans, hopefully in the first quarter of 2025. So that's the goal there. And then the final item here. So we took an in-depth look at we did an assessment of missed service from driver and bus shortages. So one of the questions we get sometimes is, you're waiting for a bus, it doesn't show up, what happened? And sometimes that's due to service cuts that may occur that day. So we took a close look at this to see what that looks like. So we conducted a review of missed hours due to very specifically driver and bus shortages to determine the impact that this has on our customers and to find areas for improvement. So we examined the data from the last couple of years, and we did find some insights. And we've also implemented various strategies to improve on these areas. So if we take a look at Figure 6 and Table 7, we can see that the operated hours, they actually had a significant drop in the actual operated hours in 2020 and 2021. And then from there, from 2022 through 2024, we've had a higher number of service hours that are being provided. So our actual baseline of service has gone up year over year from there. So that's great when we look at it from that perspective. Operated hours has increased over the last several years. Now, when we look at the percentages in that same Table 7, the percentage of operated hours, so that actually dropped down to 81% in 2021. And when we look at these percentages, that gives us kind of a measure of this reliability of our system. So if we're scheduled at 100% and we're only delivering 80% of those hours, there's going to be some folks waiting for a bus that didn't show up. And that's kind of the result of that. And that, which is the reason we're taking a closer look at this. So as we've seen, as we get to 2024, we didn't quite have the December data for this report, so we had to project a little bit here. We are projecting that that's coming up to around the mid 90% range. So then we took a closer look there to see what else we can find. So I think this will be on page 71 of the packet. Yep. Okay, so next we were able to develop a data set for May through November of 2024 that further examined the effects of the driver and bus shortages. Of the hours that were missed in this data set, we found that about 3/4 was due to driver shortage and about 1/4 was due to bus shortage. So that kind of gives us an idea right there. What areas are we trying to improve? Which one will have the most impact? Okay. And the next on page 72 of the packet. So now if we take a look at figure 8 and table 9, we can see that there was a peak in September at 5.7%. So when we look at these percentages here, that 5.7% is the percentage of missed service. Okay, so we can say in September, okay, it was at 94.3%. So it's getting there. We're not at 100% yet. We're still missing 5.7%. If we take a look at October, the missed service decreased in October to 3.9%. And in November, decreased again to 2.3%. So this is a positive trend. The goal is to get to near 100% of service delivered there. And we do anticipate that the trend will continue into 2025. So we do see it's a good trend. However, let's take a closer look there. We also want to examine what the impact is with that percentage. So we can say in November, well, we're only missing 2.3% of those hours. But what is that? What does that 2.3% mean? So let's take a look at what does that look like for our customers? Okay. So what we have here, if we take a closer look, now we're zooming in even further at the data from November 2024. So this is table 10. And it resulted in the following. So these are some routes with 15-minute or better service, and they're impacted as shown in this table. The impact to our customers, when service is cut because of a driver or bus shortage, it results in potentially waiting longer for a bus. So an example would be, let's say there's 4 buses per hour. So you've got 15-minute frequency, 1 bus every 15 minutes. But if there's not enough drivers that day to drive one of those buses, now we have to take 1 bus off of that. So within that hour, instead of your 4 buses, now you have only 3 buses. So 3 of those time points, the person waiting for the bus probably got the bus. 4th bus never showed up. So instead of waiting 15 minutes, now they're waiting 30 minutes. So that's the issue simplified. And then when you get into all the different frequencies and how many buses, it gets a little more complex from there. But that's kind of that's the idea there. So from the customer perspective, the folks that were waiting and the bus showed up, no problem. But that 4th time point when it didn't show up, now I'm waiting a half hour for my bus. Where's the bus? So that's what we're looking at there. And within the same table 10, we take a look because we're talking about, well, what's that 2.3% mean? What exactly does it mean? If we take a look at route 1, 10% of the days actually had that happen where a bus was missing, a bus didn't show up. It doesn't necessarily mean 10% of all service didn't work that day, but it means at least one time that day, somebody may have experienced that delay. And then on the extreme end of that is when we look at the ZEB, the Route 13, that happened 76% of the days. So again, not all service was affected necessarily, but 3/4 of the days, it happened at least once and probably multiple times where some of those time points are missing. So when we talk about the impact and when we get feedback saying, I went to get my bus and it wasn't there, we see exactly why. They're right. That is also what we're seeing here. So even with looking at that 2 to 3% missed service range, the potential impact here becomes clear for our customers, and our goal is to improve that. So the next question usually will be, what's being done to address the missed hours due to these driver and bus shortages? So we'll go ahead and go to the final pages here. So we've got a lot of detail built in here, but the key takeaways, when we're looking at the vehicle shortage, we're adding new vehicles to the fleet to replace aging vehicles. We're improving the preventative maintenance activities to prevent buses from breaking down in the first place, hopefully. And then we're improving the process for repairing the vehicles when they do break down to get them back on the road as quick as possible. On the driver's side, for the driver shortage, and as we look, that was accounting for about 3/4 of this issue that we're looking at. having more comprehensive driver training to improve safety, which also reduces accidents. And it also improves driver retention. So the better trained, the better the driver retention is. And then the biggest takeaway here, and the biggest key, is that we're adding more drivers overall to reach, more importantly, maintain that sustainable level of service. We want to have enough drivers to cover the service that's scheduled. So the whole driver shortage issue goes away once we have enough total drivers on staff, essentially. So these efforts that we've done with the contractor, we're working closely with them. We've actually seen that improve and has reduced those missed service in the recent months, as we saw on that bar chart. And we're also encouraged by the results that we're seeing, and we'll continue to work with the contractors to get this going here. And we've seen a lot of good results, and we're very confident mid 2025. We think this is going to really come to fruition here. Contractors adding a whole bunch of drivers, and that's kind of the key to the whole deal. So so that's where we're at, and we're looking forward to seeing how this plays out in 2025. So other than that, I thank you for your time, and I can take questions about the transit report. Barb.
Thank you for your report, Barb Winter. I was going to ask you about penalties, and I think if I'm reading this right without my glasses, you call it liquidated damages.
Correct. Yep.
I'd be interested in seeing maybe in a future reporting how much you're collecting on penalties.
Okay.
From the contractor, just to see how significant that is over time.
Yeah.
And if I read this right, you're analyzing, maybe not collecting, but analyzing penalties on a monthly basis now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was both on the vehicle side as well as the driver shortage side. And there was a couple of different approaches with how those liquidated damages are applied and all that. So that's
because I think that would be a good measure numerically to see how your improvements are paying off through your contractor as it relates to employment and other maintenance issues in particular.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I?
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you very much. Carlos Perez with the Colorado Springs CTAB. Yeah, I was one of those riders who was affected by the lack of service on route number 1. It's 15-minute service. I was there at the stop. This is just anecdotal, okay, one data point.
Yep.
There, and basically I'm waiting. If I was there, it was like a 25-minute wait, okay, and I was there early. So anyways, what happened is at the bus, there was one bus right ahead, and then another one came right behind it. So they were actually right after the other. You know, they're just like a little platoon right there.
Yeah.
Does that kind of affect where you have a bus that's running really late or was entered into service really late, followed by another bus, and it was really crazy because they were just going right by. He was waving us off, get the other bus behind you. Does that show up in this data?
Well, in that case, that's something that we definitely want to avoid. If we ever see buses that are bunching together, first bus picks everybody up, second bus is empty. So that's, in terms of planning, that's not what went to happen. That's not, anytime we see that, that's something we follow up with the contractor, because that's not the best practice at all. So
oh, no, I understand.
Yeah,
but does that show up in this data here when you have that kind of bunching in there and you actually missed the 15-minute service?
Got it. Excellent question. So part of this, when we look at that impact, is that those that waited, they might have gotten, in terms of ridership and boardings, they might have gotten picked up by the next bus. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're missing the bus, but it means that they're probably not catching it on time the way they had planned. So it's only to that level of detail. So it breaks it out to where that second bus is probably empty. But yeah, that's about the level it goes. So.
Well, I can just tell you, just as a follow-up, and again, this is a suggestion for future reports. I'm kind of a math and science guy, whatever. Yeah. But anyways, what I look at is, whether that 15-minute service, I was looking at the mean from that 15-minute service. And by the way, this is all tracked through GPS because we see it on Google Maps and they tell you what it is. Yeah. But a mean and standard deviation, what kind of standard deviation are we looking at for those all the routes, like for example with Route 1? And that's a kind of a mathematical question, but that would be of interest because if we're seeing a high standard deviation 2 sigma out of there, then maybe what I would have to do is maybe take an earlier bus or change bus schedule, because I got to make a connection. when these buses are late, and I actually thank the driver, thank you for speeding, okay, for getting me there. But if you miss that connection, I have a 1 hour connection. It's the 1 hour service.
Yeah.
So it's very frustrating for somebody like me as a choice rider to be able to do this. And it's a reliability question. And so you have to schedule that in. But for me, I would say I would look at means and standard deviations to understand what these numbers are rather than just simply bus shortages and driver shortages. What are the effects for real-time operations at each of these stops, especially like on the high frequency routes, the 15-minute routes. So that would be something. Maybe you can provide that information elsewhere, whatever. But to me, I'd like to see some more detail on that kind of efficiency or reliability at each one of those stops, especially on these high frequency routes. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Brandy?
I can beat the bus on my bike. It's on days where I can't ride because it's too icy, but yeah, that's what I've been doing. Actually, I hate to say that, but I can actually beat the bus on my bike. My legs are powerful enough to beat yeah, and that's what I've been doing, by the way. So I don't have to do a connection. So it's a 5-mile ride. I can beat the bus on Route 1. So yeah. And I know when I can leave in terms of standard deviations. I can say I can leave at this time. I can get to my destination. The bus, I can't do that. And that makes it really challenging for planning purposes. But I know how fast my legs can go. I cannot tell you how fast the bus will be there. And that is and by the way, everybody who rides transit will tell you that the holy grail is actually reliability. If you can predict when it's there, even if it's 30-minute service or anything, it's not just, it's the frequency, but making sure that you can get on there on the average, hit it in 7.5 minutes. But yes, I've been taking the bike because I can go faster and beat the bus. So that's me. Thank you.
Brandy?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough. And again, I know we can only do a deep dive on certain parts. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say ridership was up or down in November?
It's down.
Okay.
Yeah, the November 2024 compared to the
Yeah,
previous.
okay. All right.
For that month, yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question. You're increasing your drivers substantially. How do you balance out their hours of revenue to get them retained? I mean, you obviously are building to have a reserve. So what do you have to pay those drivers to be in reserve, or are they just unemployed until you call them?
Yeah, so it's a perfect question. That's kind of finding that balance point, exactly like you're talking about. So we're working with the contractor to find what number is high enough to provide that service, but not so high that you end up in that situation. And that's kind of one of the challenges with transit planning and especially on the operations side. So that's the exact type of considerations we're looking at. So adding the drivers, let's see how that impacts our service. You don't want it too high because then you get into that situation. So finding that balance point is the goal, but we're working with the contractor to do that.
Up to 175 drivers, that's quite an increase.
Yeah. But yeah, great question. Yep.
Okay, I got a couple of comments and questions.
Yes.
I appreciate the extra detail and the analysis behind some of the numbers. That was very informative. But I kind of noticed a trend here, and it bothers me a little bit. In terms of driver shortage, as soon as they kicked in a new family medical leave policy, driver retention or driver started calling in more. And then that trend kind of continues into maintenance, effective problem solving, urgency, and cooperation, where people weren't ahead, weren't paying attention, weren't doing the work that needed to be done and whatnot. Kind of bothers me from a worker perspective in terms of what are the kind of workers that are in here, and is this a trend that I don't see that many younger drivers. I see they're more middle-aged or a little older, which I would think would be more reliable because of the work ethic is different back then than it is now in some cases. And so what I'm concerned about is the reliability and how you go about addressing this. And so I think Brandy's comment in terms of liquidated damages, or Barb's comment about liquidated damages in terms of, is this guy paying you for not supporting you for the clause of the contract? And if not, it's got to cost him. And that's, I know that the maintenance contractor is different than the bus driver thing, but I get that. But I just didn't like the trend. It says something about the workforce. The other comment I've got is on the 2025 long range plan. I was a stakeholder in a previous long range transportation plan when I was with PPACG. And I'm going to talk to John Leotados about this, but when I look at the goals set forward for 2025 in terms of the goals that you're setting out for that stuff, I don't see I don't see the addressing of transit for the expanding population and for the expansion of the city, especially out east, up north and out east. And so I know that you can't expand it without additional funding. It's obvious you got to have money in order to provide more services. I get it. And so, everybody who's known me for a while, I'm going to bring up Fort again, the future of regional transportation. There was a study done in 2011 that addressed the regional concept of transit versus a city bus service. And we have grown way beyond in the last 12 years or so, way beyond what that study identified as a need in 2011. But with the greenhouse gas emissions ceiling that we've got in terms, I know that you're trying to buy efficient buses and those kind of things, but they're expensive and it's going to take a while to replace the fleet. But at the same time, we're still not servicing the expanded community. And the growth out east of Powers is phenomenal. And so without that, you can't put, in my opinion, what is the public opinion about transit? You don't want to expand it if the public's not going to use it. So is anybody doing or thinking about doing a survey? So what does the current generation and the people now think about public transit? If you gave it to them, would they use it? And if they said they would, then the next question is, how are we going to fund it? And so I know Gail's been around a while and she's kind of been through this, and some of you have known me for a while know that not the first time I said this. But I took part in that Fort study. It went on for almost a year. And it had people from Monument to Palmer Lake to down to Falcon to all over. And it was a great study and it had a lot of great. Unfortunately, by the time that was released, we were changing over management style and from Mayor Bach coming in, a new city council, a whole different management style, and it sat on the shelf and nobody gave it any time of day. And so, but it's an older study, but I think that study gives us some insight into what the need was at that point in time. Don't know what that is now. But I would just say that, don't expect necessarily an answer. But I would just say that if we're going into 2025 and looking at long range transportation planning, somebody ought to be thinking 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how do we address the growth? Because the growth is already here. And the greenhouse gas emission stuff with our current legislature is not going to get any lax. So anyway, Gail?
Well, I did just want to mention, and I'm sure that our friends here from Mountain Metro can supplement this as well. But in addition to the long-range transportation plan that's being overseen by PPACG, one of the components of that actually is the transit master plan, which is going to be an appendix and it gets incorporated in there. So that is going on. And there was a lot of public stakeholder engagement associated with that. And I think it's a really valid point, what you brought up from a regional approach to transit. The other thing I want to just mention, you talk about survey, and I think it's a biannual survey that happens with our ridership. Do you recall? Okay, so a triennial survey that happens with our ridership too, that helps inform how we can improve services or what's working and not working in transit, and then they use it for process improvement. The last thing I'll just mention too, I think it's really great with the way the transit master plan is going to be wrapping up. In the last legislation, there were 2 different bills that happened that are actually going to bring a lot more money for transit. And we are actually positioning ourselves today so we can capture a bulk of those as the rules come out and how we can bring those additional transit dollars, state transit dollars to our region and be able to use it to help expand Mountain Metro's service. And then the last thing I'll mention too, as part of that effort, CDOT is also working to expand bus tank service and looking how we can truly focus with mobility hubs and link our system with the bus tank system so we can get even inter-regional transportation associated with our system. So I think there's a lot of great advancements. I mean, it's a slow moving thing, I'm going to say, but I think there's a lot of great things that are on the horizon for transit.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And rail, let's get real. Personal opinion, I know it's anti, but it's more than a rider survey. It's the opinion of the non-riders is the important factor. What does the population think? I'm a public transportation advocate. But would the parents trust putting their kids on a bus to high school or from high school to a sporting activity or some other kinds of thing? And so it's not just the riders. In order to know whether you should invest the money to expand, you got to know what the non-riders think, because if you provide it and they're not going to use it, we're just wasting money.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll shut up. But I just think it's a great thing, and we've got a great opportunity here. And with our growth in our city, there's a large portion that's becoming larger and larger that's just not getting supported. So,
and I'll say one comment on that. So for the 2050 plan that's in progress, the good news there are recommendations for those expansions to the north and the east. Of course, subject to funding and takes time to build out, but those recommendations are actually in there for the 2050. So keep an eye out for that.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Jim?
Yeah, good.
Jared may know better, or Rick, but I think the end of this month, we're having a 2050 open house coming up soon. And I think it'd be incumbent on all of us to put our input in and suggestions and comments, because they're trying to get feedback to establish that and get it going.
Yeah, any feedback is good, in my opinion, in terms of, we spend a lot of money and a lot of time and energy in trying to develop our roads and improve our transportation. And maybe 10% is not enough for transit if we're going to expand it. Maybe it takes a change in the PPRTA down the road to increase a percentage of funding that goes to transit in order to be able to provide that regional service. Or in the recommendation of Ford, if you're not familiar with Ford, the recommendation coming out of that year-long study was to create an RTA-like structure just for transit. It's a separate transit tax. It's managed by a board, stuff just like the RTA is. And we would take that 10% out of RTA, and they would have their own transit's funding system, and they would manage themselves similarly to what RTA does. And that was a recommendation coming out of that Ford study. There were other things too, but anyway, so I think that when you add the combination of greenhouse, you add our population growth, and it's going to continue. It's not going to stop. The annexations that are going on, all this stuff, we have to address public transit, because right now, in my opinion, what we have is good. And I'm not a frequent bus rider like Carlos or somebody, but what we have is good, but we need to expand it, and we can't do that without funding. And that's my point. So anyway, I'll shut up. Sorry. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry about that, folks. Okay, 8B, City of Colorado Springs monthly change order and property acquisition report. Any questions for Gail on that reports in your packet? All right. your Powers North reimbursement update.
Yes, Mr. Godfrey Gale, student with the City of Colorado Springs. I wanted to present to you a revised reimbursement memo from the one that we presented on December 4th. In the end, the total amount that has been invoiced to Powers through December was that $14,717,490.41. But when we went through and did an audit, one of the things we realized that some of the costs were not attributed appropriately to Colorado Springs Utilities. So last month I reported of that 14.5 million, 14 of it was PPRTA's responsibility, when in reality right now through what's been invoiced is closer to 13.5 million. So just wanted to provide that clarification. We'll be providing a backup packet to the PPRTA staff to have that, and then we'll finish the closeout of that as the Voyager Bridge project's wrapping up and the engineering for the Powers Corridor is continuing.
Okay, thank you. That bridge is being opened is a nice addition.
It certainly is.
It's a little shorter than going all the way around. All right, any questions for Gail? All right, maintenance of effort reports, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The PPRTA establishing IGA requires the maintenance of effort provision so that each member government can report their non-RTA spending to make sure that they haven't used PPRTA to substitute or replace some of their non-RTA funding with PPRTA funding. So this is just an early reminder to everybody, and I've already sent an email reminded the respective member government staff members and did that a couple weeks ago, that the reports are going to be due in the February cycle for the CAC and the board. Just information. Be glad to take any questions.
Any questions for Rick? All right, item 9, report of board actions. It's in your packet, information. Any questions about anything that went on at the board meeting? Okay, 9B, the annual CAC report to the board. Brandy has given me a couple of changes, grammatical changes and whatnot. Anybody else got any comments or questions about that letter? You did? Thank you. What I was trying to make a point here, in addition to what we normally say, is that we've completed RTA 1 for the most part. You know, we're ready to move on and get into RTA 3. So thank you.
I kind of,
Mr.
felt
Chair.
like it was a little more inclusive than it has been in past years too.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, yeah, no, I thought it was an excellent letter. I think it kind of just stood out, and I just wanted to make sure I read it correctly. But as far as the PPRTA 2 projects, they're kind of the data is like we're 62% complete with the City of Colorado Springs and El Paso County. 30% of the PPRTA 2 projects. A cynic would say that's we only got 2 months left in our PPRTA 2, and we're only 30% done for El Paso County. And I don't know, just wanted to double check. I did. Am I reading too much into that, or are we looking at there's going to be, I don't know. It just seemed I was expecting 99.9% at this point.
So the way I
read kind of weird.
The way I kind of looked at it was that knowing that construction projects can take years, I'm looking at it from a standpoint of funding, in terms of what we've started along that thing. So we can't start any more RTA 2 projects, but the funding for those will continue until they're completed, like we've done with RTA 1. And so some of that will go on for a while. And so I was trying to point out the fact that while we didn't get it all, this is how much we've gotten, which is better than, in some, but they're certainly not complete by any means. And Powers will probably, well, that's RTA 3 though. But yeah, I don't know how to judge completion of construction. That would be a very difficult thing to kind of forecast, I would think. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but
it just kind of when I looked at it, it can be read a couple of different ways that, we're not going to finish 70%. For this is El Paso County. I compare and this has been coming up before. El Paso County is at basically I look at it as like a runner, as I see, Colorado Springs, they got like an 8-minute pace, and these guys here are like, half that 16-minute pace on their runs here, really far behind, and are you going to be able to catch up? And it just seems kind of jarring there. I don't know how else to phrase that, but it just if someone was to read that and not have the context that we have there, it just sticks out. And it looks as though we do have the accounting. We have the 30%, 62 and 30%, but with only just a few months left of we're done with collecting the money. And El Paso County still has 70% left to go. It just, what are we looking at there? Maybe, I don't know if it goes in this letter or not. Maybe it's a future topic item, but is it going to be 70%, 10 years from now, we're going to be 100% there, or what's going to happen there?
That's why Josh gets paid the big bucks.
He is paid the big bucks, and I'm here to be just a fly in the ointment here. I think this could generate questions without the proper context. So I don't know how to phrase it there, but I understand, this is factual information. We just need to be aware of where we're at.
Perhaps you ought to put an asterisk there that 105 has put the county back on the 30% level. If they could do 105 and get it up to speed, they'd probably be at 90%.
There's a level of detail I was trying to stay out of. Anybody want me to change it? No. Okay. All right.
This is very good. I thought it was got a lot of good there, but and I was going to say, if you want to have any questions, you go back to the quarterly reports. That's how I thought of it.
Yeah.
The quarterly reports has the detail that you would need to put this in the right context.
And thanks for bringing that up, because when we have those quarterly reports, I again remind everybody, and for our new guys, that quarterly report, you can throw all this other stuff away after our meeting, but hang on to that quarterly report, because that is a great report. When somebody asks a question about a project, you can go to that report. Rick spends the staff, the county and city staff, and all the member government staffs spend a lot of time putting that together, and it's a host of information. But that's my go-to when somebody's complaining about a project is to go to the last quarterly report. And Rick spends time, as our next object on our agenda shows, riding around looking at all this stuff to make sure they've done what they said they're billing for it. So, thanks for bringing it up, Carlos. So the quarterly report does show where we are on stuff. So if you want to know the status of a particular project, that's a great place to go.
Jim, can I ask a question? Maybe that'll help if this does come up in the board meeting. And I don't know if it's you, Rick, or Josh. Are there any projects on PPRTA 2 for the county that have not been started at all, whether design or construction? So then maybe at least
Randy,
you
I
could
can answer that question.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so we have started every single PPRTA 2 project, at least for the design. There are 3 RTA 2 projects that we haven't gone to construction yet. Eastonville Road, which we are just about to advertise. Beacon Light Road. And if you recall, we were held up a lot because of the condemnation with Douglas County on that one. And then now the Buc-ee's, of course, that may be going in there. And then Deer Creek is the other RTA 2 project that hasn't gone past the design phase. So I think Carlos is right with the context of this. We have 30% of the projects that are complete, but it doesn't mean we are only 30% of the way through the project efforts. I mean, you could put a number to that. We could be 60%. I mean, Highway 105, we're just about done with phase A for that, which is about half of the project. We're about halfway through South Academy. So, I mean, we're making significant progress, probably not as much as we would like, but the 30% is not indicative of the actual progress that we're making on the projects.
Okay, that's a real good point. And why don't I work with Josh and Gail and Rick to get to, as you pointed out, most everything's been started or under contract. That would show that we're making the progress. to address Carlos's point of only 30% looking low, but we've completed this amount, but everything else is under contract or whatever the number might be. Is that okay with everybody if I make that change?
Also the city too.
Yeah.
Same thing, apply the same.
Carlos, turn on your microphone.
Yeah, and just apply the same kind of analysis for the city projects. And I don't know if everything else, like the other member governments, Manitou Springs, if that is a, because of the amounts, maybe it's
Right.
not worth mentioning. We're silent on that, by the way, in this here, because most of the money does go for Colorado Springs and El Paso County, but we have other member governments, and is that a valid question to apply that analysis to these other member governments? Again, I didn't have any changes in the phrasing. It just, I think it was, just seemed jarring when I read it, but.
Good point.
You know.
Good point, Rick.
Just a word of caution with regard to timing. The board packet goes out tomorrow midday.
I could make these pretty quick.
Okay.
It's just either an additional sentence or adding to that sentence saying of the everything's under contract and the percentages. And Gail, you can let me know, is everything's not under contract in your list, is it, or is it?
No, not everything's in construction, but there is a section in our quarterly report where it covers what's still in engineering and what's in construction, what's complete. So we can pull those straight off
Yeah,
those
if you could
charts.
just give me those numbers, I'll change that sentence and just add that, show that something to the fact that while people respectively only completed, everything else or certain percentages are under design or under contract, and that'll reinforce the point you were making, I think. Is that all right with everybody?
Two major problems that the county has.
Yeah.
Rick, turn on your microphone.
South Academy and 105. Yeah, those are the two major projects that tie up a bunch of their stuff. So, okay. All right. We'll knock that out and get that to you this afternoon, Rick. May have to have a beer, but anyway. All right, staff field review report. Any questions? This is Rick's report on riding around and.
Jim, do we have to approve that? We have approved next to the CAC annual report.
Oh, I'm
to the
sorry.
board.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Do I have a motion to approve the report as suggested, amended, or something to that effect? Okay, Rick, okay. Second, okay. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any objection online? Okay, great.
Excuse me, who made the second?
All right. Any questions for Rick on the field report? Rick, are you still, if somebody was interested in riding with you one day, is that okay with you? Yeah, I rode with him one day several years ago, and it's kind of interesting. He goes out, and if the invoice says street slab's a contract at 2324 U Street, he's right there. And if it's only 2 slabs, it gets annotated. So he's double checking what we're paying for. So that's a good thing. All right. Agenda topics for next meeting. Anybody have anything burning we want to talk about?
I just have a suggestion. In the coverage for the directors meeting, the lobbyist called down and gave a report. And I was wondering, since we have Zoom capabilities, that on occasion, maybe the lobbyist and CDOT could by Zoom give us an update on maybe major changes or legislation that could affect us. And it wouldn't have to be a regular scheduled thing, but maybe an appointed type thing where we could get information from them. Just a thought.
Greg?
With regard to the lobbyist, he's primarily, as you've known over the years, playing defense because of the PPRTA and the board are not offering amendments to the RTA state law. But he watches to see if somebody is attempting to change the RTA state law that might impact us either for good or for ill. So yes, I can, if he sees something and brings it to the board, I can certainly bring it to the CAC as well.
Yeah, we
But-
could report out on that. I think
So I think that way I can inform the CAC if anything's happening, but so that's on the lobbyist side. On the CDOT side, I think the full CAC needs to discuss that.
Yeah, so my thoughts on CDOT, and I've had this conversation in the last month. We really don't deal with CDOT that much. And so having them come brief us on stuff, I don't think is a valuable time for us. Our focus is regional, city, county, and whatnot. And the discussion came up about the whole academy deal. That is totally outside of our control. We have no impact on that. And we're not developing policy that controls traffic flow or any of that kind of thing. And so we've got PPACG that deals with CDOT and in terms of the transportation planning and the TIP and all of those projects that are funded by state and federal monies. And I just don't see a role for CDOT in what we do. If there is a major project like a widening of I-25 or something bigger that maybe us being aware of it would be okay. But I just don't see the value in having CDOT as part of this, given that we're just our municipalities and our member governments. But I'm open to something I'm overlooking.
24 reads. They're planning on doing.
Your microphone.
They're talking about widening 24 from Garland to the Falcon or Peyton. And so I just kind of thought when projects like that come up that really affect some of our looking at other projects around that, it might be valuable to maybe Ed could do it since he's head of the PPACG. When something like this comes up, he can just mention, well, CDOT is going to do, US 24 starting da. And I don't think that we need a regular report from them, but every once in a while they have a project within our purview that's going to affect what we do. And I think that's one of them.
Okay, good point, Rick.
Or we could ask PPACG staff,
Right.
particularly John Leosantos or one of his specific staff members who deal with that project to come make a 3 to 5 minute report on an as needed basis.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion because all of that major work is the guys upstairs are aware of all that stuff going on. So Ed?
The last Wednesday of each month, PPACG CAC meets and they are online, and Jared could put you on if you wanted to listen to any of those meetings. Routinely, CDOT attends or has information available. So that's another option if you're interested.
To Mr. Chair, yeah, just to add more, I wasn't going to bring this up again, but I did have interesting conversation with a colleague of mine, and he was asking, hey, when is Powers going to be done all the way to the freeway? And it's like, well, part of it is PPRTA, and we have the Voyager to I-25, but there's also the bridge, the grade separated interchange, but that's a CDOT project. And he was just asking about the sequencing and timing a lot. And I didn't have an answer. And it's like, well, PPRTA goes to this point, but I can't tell you when CDOT money will come in to work on the grade separated at, 83 and Powers there that will provide the connectivity all the way to the end. And really it's not a concern about jurisdiction. I just want to be able to travel the whole corridor. When is it going to be done? So it's the bigger picture. It did come up. This is coming up from citizens. It is a valid thing. And I keep kind of punting on the CDOT question, but I don't have any knowledge of when that, I think it's what I think Gail or some people have mentioned, maybe like 5 years out before that may get funded for grade separated. And then we have a complete corridor all the way to the freeway. But I couldn't answer that question, and it's not going to, maybe in a report somewhere, but I just didn't have that comprehensive end to end. And so, yeah, I would say CDOT interacts with PPRTA projects in a way that affects the traveling public, and people ask questions. So You know, it is a valid question. And I think it's been brought up before as an agenda item from Mr. Zelenak. He has brought that up several times to have that. So there's a request for this type of information to be shared.
So, Mr. Chair, Gail Sutter with the City of Colorado Springs. So holistically, the city is coordinated with CDOT very routinely. And there is a section in your quarterly report that talks about the plethora of projects that CDOT has going on within the city limits and the interactions that they would have with our projects, whether or not, plethora projects, all the projects are listed there. And then there's also a column that shows whether or not PPRTA is going to have funding associated with it. I want to be clear that the missing segment of Powers today is not a CDOT project, period. Now, today, I say that it will be a future portion of their infrastructure, but it's a long and complicated process that's overseen really into the belly of the power swap agreement that first happened in 1999 with an update. I think it happened in 2007.
The devolution agreement that occurred.
Yeah,
or the
right.
swap. Okay.
It's the swap agreement.
Mhm.
But so right now that segment from 83 or from Interquest to Voyager is going to be a city project.
Mhm.
However, because it had federal dollars at one point in time and it's going to connect to the state's highway system on either end, there's involvement, but the city is going to be overseeing that project. Got to remember too, we also have a relationship with Copper Ridge Metro District and their ability to fund to basically their bonding capacity that they're going to be funding the project with the PPRTA to do reimbursement on it. And finally, the last thing to say, I would direct anyone who's inquiring about Powers to the city's website, coloradosprings.gov/projects, and have them search for Powers. Right now, that site is focused primarily on the Voyager Bridge, that interchange construction. And it's going to stay that way actually for a short period of time because there's some very tricky negotiations and work going on both with CDOT and the Federal Highway Administration. And some of it we can't give clear answers on because of some of the changes or some of the policies they have today and some of the anticipated policy changes that could happen this month. So when we have the information, we will be updating it. I will tell you our overall goal is to start construction on the local bridges next fall and to have Powers done by 2023.
2028.
2020, I'm sorry. What did I say? I meant 2030. 2030. There's a 3 in there. I'm a little dyslexic.
Engineers are highly optimistic. I work with engineers and we actually are very optimistic, but no, it was, but I understand that the complexity there, but the things is I always kind of say, okay, I got to do a double check, especially for work that's done within the state right away. And it's
states right away. It is private property, period.
The right now where there's no right now where it's private, when you say private property,
it is privately owned property, not city property, not right away. It is privately owned property.
Like Pine Forest or something. Interesting. I thought there was it was owned by the state highway. This is a area we have a state highway, but it's on private land or private property.
It is not right away. It is contemplated to be future right away to be dedicated, and it was contemplated in the annexation agreement when Flying Horse came into the city limits.
Okay.
It is a multi-process, several step, very complex.
I have learned something new. That's interesting.
That's good. Somebody write that down.
Yeah. Write it down. Well, yeah, write it down. Now, every day I learn something new. That's my goal, is to learn something new. But I'll look at the website. I'll see if I was going to go back and look at the quarterly reports to answer the question, because I know a lot of the detail in there and it's on the city website. But it was, again, it goes back to this question. These nuances here with CDOT is of interest, I think, to the motoring public and to and us as well, to understand this and be able to explain it in a cogent way is important. So sure, I appreciate that. Thank you,
Brandy.
And I think that definitely brings up the notion of we are not the only committee. So this group is very interested in what's going on, but there are other committees that are taking on those pieces of information. So I know we'd like to be a clearinghouse for all things El Paso County, but I think for this particular piece, resources on where and how we can do our homework will be helpful, but I don't know that we need to bring every single one of those entities into this room when other people like PPACG are doing it. And if they could just give us a 5-minute report every so often, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, good wrap up. And back to Rick's comment was we'll ask PPACG to periodically, especially when there's a big project affecting a major thoroughfare. I think that's fair for us to know what's going on. It will just help us answer those questions of the citizens. So, okay. Any other communications? Anybody, Kathy?
I just want to add a comment on the CDOT presentation topic. As far in relation to having somebody come give a courtesy update, given some of the regular comments that we have in this committee from one or more members, I would want to be cautious about having someone come in, billed as a courtesy update or overview, just so that anyone that's not happy with how signage or notice or whatever's going doesn't just, we're not providing an outlet for somebody to express their frustrations. I think it's a good idea to have a neutral person give a neutral report with just the facts.
Agree. Okay. If there aren't any further comments, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your time and being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody online.